Okay. Folks are trickling in. Good morning. Good morning to our attendees. We're going to get started probably here in a couple minutes just to give a few more folks a chance to trickle in. Thank you for joining us. All right, 2 minutes after the hour, we can go ahead and start. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for what is our first panel of many this week. Not our first event. We had a meet and greet yesterday, but this is our first panel of Black Space Week this year. So very excited. This is our Black in Museums and Planetariums panel. A little bit about me. I'm KeShawn Ivory. I'm the events chair of Black In Astro. So all of the Zooms for this week were coordinated by yours truly. I am also a fifth year PhD candidate in astrophysics at Vanderbilt University. And more relevant to the content of this panel, I am also an aspiring planetarian museum educator, something in that vein. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited for our conversation today. And we've assembled truly a star-studded, incredible panel for you all. And so let's get to the introductions of our panelists. I'm going to go in the order that everybody's on my screen. So let's start with Mr. James Albury.
Thank you, KeShawn. Well, my name is James Albury, and I'm the manager of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium here in Gainesville, Florida at Santa Fe College. Do you want me to elaborate any more? I can say like a sentence or maybe.
Yeah, sure. Whatever,
Okay.
whatever you feel is important for an intro.
Okay, so and I'll get into more of this during my talk, that I've been in the planetarium field for an extremely long time. I started when I was about 14 years old as a volunteer, and then I started working at that planetarium where they paid me money at 15, making $3.75 an hour. I thought I was like, woohoo! I was making it big. All my other friends, they were working at like the usual place, like the grocery store or local restaurant, but I was working at the planetarium, and everybody in town knew the planetarium. So it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed working there. And by the time I'd worked there about 6 years, we had experienced Halley's Comet. So I saw how a large planetarium deals with a major astronomical event. I said, this is really cool. So while I was in college, I decided to change my major from aerospace engineering, which was my original track, to astronomy and physics so I could direct a planetarium one day. And I've been director here for now about 16 years. So I'll shut up now and let everybody else go.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Next up on my screen is Dr. Cheeseborough.
Good morning, everybody. So, my name is Dr. Belinda Cheeseborough, and I work as a STEM education specialist at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It's a long name. And so mainly my duties at the museum is working on any STEM programming that people want me to do slash what I want to do, and also creating some content for people who attend our museum or just virtually in general. So that's primarily what I do at the museum.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Dr. Pitts.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Derek Pitts, Chief Astronomer and Planetarium Programs Director at the Franklin Institute Science Museum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been at the Franklin Institute for a very long time and actually evolved into this position. When I first started out at the Franklin Institute, I came there as a student of astronomy from St. Lawrence University, student of physics really from St. Lawrence University, and was applying for a summer job as a science instructor for the museum. This is way back when dinosaurs walked the earth. And the position of museum science educator, or I should say informal science education, was not really as strongly recognized as it is today. But during my time at the Franklin Institute as that summer employee, I eventually became a full-time employee and when I graduated from St. Lawrence University, and I've been here ever since, but doing all manner of things that revolve around astronomy education, astronomy teaching, astronomy programming of every kind there is to do. We have an observatory here along with the planetarium, and I started out there mastering all that stuff and then moved over to the planetarium and essentially took that over and creating programs and of all sorts. And I've been doing all that kind of work around the Delaware Valley ever since.
Incredible. So we can get into our questions now, and reminders of the audience that the Q&A is open. So if you have a question at any point, just drop it in the Q&A, and then when we get to that point, we will get to as many as we can. We should have plenty of time. So for the first question, we've kind of started touching on this a little bit, but I'm just interested in kind of your path and your journey to where you are now. And for those of you who have been in the field for like a really long time, but maybe talk more about your journey from the beginning to when you first got into planetariums to now, and then for Dr. Cheeseborough, how you first got into astrophysics and how that's sort of like manifested in your current position. So I'm really interested in how you carved out the space that you currently occupy. In any order you can answer.
I guess I'll go first. So everything started from when I was little. I tell this story often, and I think a lot of us can relate that, when you're little, you have many interests, and of course, mine was science. And fortunately, my dad, growing up here in DC, I actually am a DC native. I kind of was born here, raised here, and then left, and then came back to work here. So it's great to be back in the area as an adult. So it's like a different experience. But going back to when I was little, my dad would take me to the Rock Creek Park Nature Center here in DC, and he would take me to the planetarium there. So that was the start of my astronomy obsession. And so with that, that kind of instilled a seed in me to want to pursue astronomy, but I didn't know what that looked like until I got to high school when I started watching these documentaries called The Universe and learning more about these different scientific concepts. But what really inspired me to pursue it was seeing these different scientists talk about the work that they do with such passion and also talking about the relevant topic in that particular episode. And I felt like I wanted to be able to understand the work that they were doing and also to be able to share that knowledge with others as well. So, like, that really inspired me to pursue physics in high school. And then as I was going through undergrad, I discovered that I really did enjoy communicating scientific concepts to the public. So during each time of year when we would have prospective high school students come to our college campus, so I went to, for context, I went to Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan. It's a private Christian university there. So very small campus at the time. I think there was probably around like 2,000 or 2,500. Yeah. Undergraduates. It didn't even have like a graduate school. There was a seminary because it's a Christian campus, but other than that, not really a graduate program. Um, and so with that, the prospective students coming in to view our physics program there, I just really enjoyed like the toys. Physics has toys. We bring stuff out, and it was just fun seeing the oohs and the ahs and them like really getting it or having that eureka moment or just, being amazed by the cool things that we can do in science. And so that really instilled, again, another seed in me to want to pursue a path in science communication. So when I got into grad school and I wanted to get my PhD, I was mostly focused on the research, but I also tried to take opportunities to explore that side that I really enjoyed when I was in undergrad, which is that science communication side. So during my program, I took the opportunity to work at the planetarium that we had at West Virginia University. So that's where I got my PhD from, was West Virginia University. And fortunately, there was a little planetarium there on top of our department. So I was able to work there as a teaching assistant in the planetarium, which is the coolest teaching assistant job that you could do in grad school. And so my favorite times there was mainly handling my main responsibilities for the planetarium was handling the field trips, which was daunting because, kids. Um, but I just really enjoyed the moments, especially like the fifth graders. I always had like really fun fifth graders come through. I still remember this one moment with this one little boy. He had like the little glasses, this like cute little adorable boy, and he was obsessed with black holes. And that day was about black holes, and he wanted to ask me so many different questions. He was like, "Do you know about this system?" And he would say the name of this X-ray binary, and then like, "Do you know about this?" And I'm over here like, "I don't have it like you, but I love the energy." And I still remember when his teacher like picked him up to drag him away because they had to leave. And he was literally in the elevator door, like trying to keep it open and be like, "I have more questions for you." And I was like, "Just tell your teacher to email me." So it's just like fun memories like that, from working in the planetarium that really helped be like, yeah, I really do enjoy the work that I do. So when it came time to graduate and finish with my PhD and my dissertation and all that fun jazz, um, I was unemployed for a few months because it's not always easy getting a job, especially, the last year, especially the last 6 months, you're trying to find a job before you get out of grad school. So it doesn't always happen. But fortunately, from while I was in grad school, one of the biggest opportunities that actually helped me with getting my Smithsonian position right now is from my internship that I did in the Smithsonian. So I actually did a summer internship. Um, was in my fourth year of grad school. I think, yeah, it was after my fourth year of grad school. I did a summer internship and um, at the Air and Space Museum. And I had a fantastic supervisor. She was amazing. The first meeting we had, she was like, "What are your needs?" And that was the first time that I felt seen because grad school was a rough experience. It's rough for everybody. But it was again just this reaffirming moment of like, I really like the space that I'm in. And it gave me the knowledge of how museums work in general and how they're different to a regular academic institution, but it still carries over some of those similarities of an academic institution, like especially with the research component. You have the quirky researchers there too, especially at the Air and Space Museum. And that was a really fun summer, and it was really cool to have the opportunity to work with other museum educators, especially the astronomy education team there at the Air and Space Museum, and also astronomy education volunteers, which is really cool to be working with a volunteer and also learning how to manage other people, which is something that I kind of did in the planetarium, but to more of an extent here during my internship. So that was another great experience there too. So because of that, during that, I was able to meet the STEM manager at the time at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And that was my connection into the museum where I'm at now. And unfortunately, he is no longer here. He left last year, but he definitely helped with the seed that planted here at the museum to at least have a space to do STEM things. Because when he came here, there was nothing. And so he kind of started things. So I've kind of taken over the mantle a little bit to continue some of the work that we were able to do while we were working together. But yeah, so that's kind of a summary of how I got into working at the museum. So mainly just taking those opportunities I did, especially while I had the time in grad school, to really foster that um, love and passion that I had for science communication by taking the internship and just working in the planetarium there.
Thank you. I really wanted to hear from you on this one because I know your institution's a little different than the others. That was fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any of our other panelists want to talk more about their journeys?
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit more on mine. So it sounds like Dr. Cheeseburger and I, we had very similar beginnings, because I grew up in Miami, Florida, and my parents took me to the planetarium, particularly my dad, because he and I would stay up and watch Star Trek, and we also watched documentaries. And Cosmos was the original Cosmos was Dr. Carl Sagan. That's the one that inspired me. I was born in the late 1960s, so I'm younger than, uh, I guess I started my interest in astronomy about a week after the dinosaurs died. So I'm kind of in that area. But
But the
there's
space
some,
age.
yeah. Yeah, oh, I remember Apollo, but I've realized that some of my students here, like the kindergartners and first graders, they don't even remember COVID-19. I'm like, oh my gosh, that. So I have students here that weren't alive during Challenger. They weren't alive during the Columbia incident. So, but one of those things that I've noticed about the young people who visit, including myself, there's a certain spark. Like you were mentioning that young person who really liked black holes. You're going to come across in science communication, you're going to get someone who is like us, and no matter what field it's in, it could be in medicine, it could be in engineering, it could be in botany or biology. If someone plants that seed, visiting a museum or a planetarium, or at least speaking with someone who has intimate knowledge of the thing that is your hot button, if if they can water that seed, it can take them on an amazing academic and career journey. So when I was 13 years old, after having visited the planetarium several times in Miami, we went to see a show called Child of the Universe, and it was produced by Jack Horkheimer, who is the director of our planetarium. And he's best known for his TV show that originally started off as Star Hustler, and they changed the name to Stargazers because when you type in Star Hustler on the internet, you don't get what you expect to get. So, anyway, but Jack Horkheimer, he had created the first and only show uh, on TV that talks about naked eye astronomy, particularly at the time. Now we have a lot more shows like that. But the show, the basic premise was the more we learn about the universe, the more insignificant it can make us feel. And a lot of people express that existential angst in art or music. So he compared it and contrasted it with Kurt Weill's Three Penny Opera, particularly the song Lost in the Stars. And when we learned more that we were no longer at the center of the universe and the universe is infinitely vast and infinitely small, where does that put us? But the show was so popular, inspiring to so many people, it would played annually at various institutions. So when I was 13, it was the 10th anniversary of Child of the Universe. So I went to see it, and it inspired me so much that I actually had the courage to go to the console operator that day, who happened to be the production coordinator for the facility. I asked, I asked one of the most important questions I ever asked anyone other than my wife to marry me. But I said, how do you get to do what you do for a living? Because if you think about it, you could be around planetarium people or whatever when you're out at the grocery store, but you don't know what they do. But I've encouraged a lot of the young people, particularly African American students, if you find someone that is doing something that you want to do, ask them. Ask them, how did I get started? How did you get started? I recently recorded a video with one of our outreach programs, and I put it on my Facebook page of what did I does it require academically to become what I am, and I can send the link to you, KeShawn, after the presentation, so you can share it with others. But having that conversation, we talked for a while, and the Arthur was the name of the person I talked to. I called him Uncle Arthur. During our conversation, he invited me to become an apprentice at the planetarium. And I worked as a volunteer. They taught me how to operate the equipment. They taught me more of my constellations and how I could find the others. And then when I was 15 years old, he was offered a position as director of the planetarium in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And he called me on the phone. He said, James, I'm going to be leaving. But I want to offer you the position of being a console operator on the weekends. And that's when the planetarium made most of their bread and butter days, as they used to call it. So yeah, I was 15 years old operating a machine that was $250,000, and I couldn't even drive a car yet. But it was the most amazing thing. A lot of my colleagues in the planetarium field, a lot of them started off as a young person. So one of the things I want to inspire the viewers of this panel's discussion is that no matter if you feel that, yeah, we are underrepresented in the astronomy field, but Our ancestors have paved a path for us. And if you're passionate enough and you connect yourself with the correct people and try not to let the microaggressions and little things that annoy you derail you from your passion, um, you'll if you find something you enjoy doing and people pay you to do it, you won't feel like you're working. So, and that's, I think, all I'll share for now.
You caught me. This whole thing was my long-winded way of asking you all how you do what you do. Dr. Pitts?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I have a slightly different path in that the environment I grew up in, which was a very nice environment for the most part, um, I had no connection to anyone who knew anything about science at all. I was the weird kid in my neighborhood because all I could think about or have anything to do with was science-related stuff. So, people often ask me, at what point did you realize you were interested in astronomy or you wanted to become an astronomer? And I have to say, I don't know, because I've always been interested in astronomy. I've always wanted to pursue some path in astronomy. You would say that generally I love science. I always tell people without any just unabashedly, I love science. I can never get enough of it in any way, shape, or form. But astronomy is really the place where I belong. I started out, as a very young kid in the early 1960s, studying what was going on with space exploration. Like you, James, following the space program. It was the most visible connection to space that was available to me at the time. Because in my neighborhood, there was nobody connected to astronomy. Nobody knew anything about astronomy. Nobody knew anywhere to go about astronomy at all. So it was space exploration. So I became a rocketry expert. And, can you imagine a 9-year-old rocketry expert? Well, that was me at the time. And like I say, the weird kid on the block. I was the kid that was doing science demonstrations in junior high school for, the entire junior high school audience, because I was so much in love with science. I wanted other people to share my passion about it as well. So I was doing that even in junior high school. I was interested, of course, as a college student, but didn't really know anything about the Science Museum in Philadelphia, I have to admit. I'd been to the Franklin Institute a number of times as a school student, but I never really thought about it as a career opportunity because those weren't the careers that I saw in my everyday life. So not knowing what that career path was going to be, not choosing among any of those things that I typically saw in my neighborhood or in my life, I knew it was going to be in science somewhere, and I knew it was going to be in astronomy, but I had no idea what the path was going to be to get there. So, I created the path essentially myself, going to St. Lawrence University by figuring out that physics was the path that was going to get me to astronomy. And so I did that. But when I was leaving St. Lawrence University, I had this job offer from the Franklin Institute. Can you imagine a college graduate getting paid right out of school? Wow, how tempting was that? So I jumped on the opportunity because I had already worked 2 years at the Franklin Institute, 2 summers, as a science demonstrator. So here I am in a science environment where I'm connecting with the general public, talking about my favorite subject, and I'm getting paid for this. Wow, what could be better than that? So I decided to continue with that and took the full-time job, whereupon I had the opportunity to start working in the observatory. I worked in the observatory along with the other, job requirements of giving science demonstrations of every type. The liquid nitrogen demonstrations you see in science museums? If I've given that show once, I've given that show 1,000 times. So any of those kind of science museum demonstrations, I've done 1,000 times. On my way to actually doing the same kind of thing of developing science programs and demonstrations in the Franklin Institute's observatory. The 2 telescopes were in the observatory at the time, a big reflector and a big refractor. And essentially the program there had been languishing for more than a decade. So I revitalized that program. And in revitalizing that program, I built up several other public-facing astronomy programs that worked through the observatory. And of course, the museum loved it because they, had this great opportunity to showcase this other, resource that they had in the building of the observatory. And we figured out a way to really make it very popular within the museum. But by that time, I'm doing most of the science, most of the astronomy education in the museum. The planetarium director notices this and decides to pull me over into the planetarium to do that same kind of work in the planetarium. So I start doing planetarium shows, the live sky to night shows, the pre-recorded shows, things like that. I essentially became a technician at the same time as I'm becoming a presenter in the planetarium. And I've been to the planetarium before, yes, but that really wasn't the aspiration I was thinking of. I was thinking more about, astronomer at the observatory on the mountaintop, discovering new things about the universe, only to come to realize through my work at St. Lawrence University that I don't want to be a bench scientist. That's not really what I want to be. I really want to be something else because this is too exciting. I want to share this information and knowledge with people, but I have no idea what that avenue is, but the Franklin Institute gave me that. So I go over to the planetarium, become a presenter technician, learn all about the technology of the planetarium, which of course I love the technology side of that, but I also love the theatrical presentation side, and I have a great time with that. So much so that I eventually become the planetarium show producer. I then eventually become the planetarium director after I've run a team of show producers. I think we had a group of about maybe up to 10 at one time producing shows for the planetarium. We had great modern equipment. We had the first Digistar, the second Digistar projector in the country was at Fels Planetarium in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And I ran development production for that. When we started doing digital stuff, I ran all the production for that, eventually became the director of the planetarium when the then director moved on to become a museum vice president, eventually became, after director of the planetarium, director of the IMAX theater. I took over and ran all that stuff when it first opened and coordinated all that activity, got into some IMAX work, and then became a museum vice president in charge of all that kind of visual stuff, which was really fantastic. But at the same time, I started doing a lot of TV and radio stuff and eventually took on doing all that kind of work at Franklin Institute also. So the museum didn't really have a position for me, actually, for the kind of ascendancy that I was on, the path that I was on. So they started creating positions. The first position they created was chief scientist. So I was the first chief scientist at Franklin Institute. And then they started to create other sort of positions like that for other disciplines, like chief bioscientist, chief environmental scientist. And, there's the only thing I haven't done at Franklin Institute at this point is I haven't been president. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. There's too much administrative management stuff in that, and no fun being a presenter sharing my passion for astronomy and the universe, which I think is critically important because I always feel that the more people can understand the universe, the more universally connected we will all feel. Not only that, but the better we'll understand basic and general science, which is critically important these days. So I feel like my mission is mixed with my passion really well around those particular topics. Astronomy, of course, has been a tremendous avenue for me to all kinds of connections, just the most amazing connections, both in astronomy and space exploration. So that's been my path. I sort of made the whole thing up because Franklin didn't have it at the time. And in the meantime, the field of informal science education has really exploded and become something real, for which I'm very grateful because it means that me and all of the rest of us that are here on the panel can be employed forever.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to join the ranks of employed forever. That's my
Come along, join us. We'll suck you in.
Given
So,
the dark side.
yes, exactly. So whenever I tell people what kind of jobs I'm interested in, like planetarium and things like that, one of the main questions I get is, "Oh, cool, but like, what would you do? What do they do?" And I'm sure there are some folks on the call who are kind of wondering that as well. And so, briefly, if you could kind of give folks on in the audience an idea of kind of what you do in a day, like what your daily schedule looks like, what your duties are.
Okay. Should I go first or
Sure.
better? Okay. Yeah, that was one of the, I guess you could say, minor annoyances of changing my major from engineering to astronomy. First, everyone thinks it's astrology. So at Thanksgiving dinner, they said, "Aren't you getting that astrology degree?" I was like, "No, astrologers don't have to take calculus or physics." Secondly, I would get the question, "Oh, well, what are you going to do with that degree?" I said, "Well, I guess I could make horoscopes in the parking lot after school." I mean, they never confuse chemistry with alchemy, but they always do astrology and astronomy because they had similar beginnings. One uses scientific method, the other one doesn't. But so in a typical day, other than the usual prepping and primping so that I look respectable when I go to work, um, like today, for example, I have 3 school field trips. Now, we don't have school field trips at this time, it's mostly summer camps by now. But that was one of the things that I particularly enjoy receiving is seeing people of various grade levels from kindergarten all the way up to about 6th grade. That's about when our school district, that's how, that the level that we see regular attendance. And I would say the majority of young people, particularly at kindergarten and 1st grade, this is the first time they've been in a space like the planetarium. So when I greet them, I say, "Well, if you're new here, it will remind you of being in a movie theater for those who, have been to a movie theater, except instead of being square, the room's round and the entire ceiling is our projection screen." But they don't get that part until they actually walk into the physical space. And I remember having that same feeling when I walked into the planetarium in Miami. Now, the planetarium in Miami is cavernous. It was 60 feet in diameter. So it's about, yeah. So our planetarium is only 10 meters in diameter here, but our spring line, the base, where the screen and the wall meet, is only 6 feet high. So you feel very close to what's going on. So when a young person walks into our dome and we have the cove lighting and the spacey music, they go, "Wow." And that look on their face at that moment, it reminds me of what it was like because I didn't know what to expect. I was kind of frightened at first because I didn't know what that big machine was in the middle of the room, and it looked like it had a death laser on it or something, and it moved. But when the lights went down, I felt like I was traveling through space. I said, "This is the coolest thing ever." So, so I would say about 70% of my day for most days is doing field trips. So I'm the presenter, but I have a cadre, as I call it, of student employees here. And I created a student employment position here at Santa Fe College. By the way, we're Santa Fe College in Gainesville, Florida, not Santa Fe Community College in New Mexico, because we often get confused. I've had people send us reservations and they were in Albuquerque. I said, the bus trip here alone is going to take most of that money for you. So, but anyway, so I have them assist me in doing the initial introduction of the show, and they monitor the show and stuff like that. I also have to do administrative work, so I'm in charge of the operations of the planetarium. So unlike Dr. Pitts, I kind of I'm regularly, I guess you could say, in the trenches because in a college we don't have necessarily the same structure as they do in museums. So in most museums, you have an executive director who doesn't they don't do the daily shows anymore. Um, but when you're a manager, you still have that. You you coordinate the operation of the planetarium, and you may have a committee, like we have an advisory committee. But because I have been in our field for so long and I've made so many connections with the planetarium community, the advisory committee doesn't really give me advice anymore because I know more than they do. But because we do have members of our advisory committee who are members of the public who are part of like the school board, for example, of the different counties nearby. So, but we make sure our programming is meeting the standards of the science science communication for kindergarten through 6th grade at least. But yeah, so other than administrative stuff, and I do live planetarium shows on the weekend. On Friday night, I do a live star talk on what's up in the night sky. I call that show Florida Skies. And one of the fun things I had the blessing of doing over the last 9 years was I co-hosted the TV show Stargazers after Jack Horkheimer had passed away. Dean Regas and I hosted the program together. And basically, we talked about what's up in the night sky. So when our time with public television in that aspect ended, I said, I really enjoyed doing that. So I created my own show called The Sky Above Us, and I have a website, theskyaboveus.org, where you can see me doing what I was doing back then. And I still say, keep looking up at the end, like Jack did, and Neil does, and all the others. I think most of us who have some sort of star talk type thing, we always say, keep looking up at the end, because that's a good admonition. Jack, he had put on his tombstone, keep looking up was my lifelong admonition, and it seems that's all I can do from my current position. So, but yeah. And another thing about being a science communicator is that when I started working here in October of 2009. About 2 weeks later, TV20, our local television station, called me on the phone, and they said, "Hey, we heard there's a meteor shower coming up. Can we come over and do an interview with you?" And I realized, I'm now the Jack Horkheimer of Gainesville. So after I did my interview, I called Jack on the phone. I said, "Jack, I just had a Horkheimer moment." And he said, K.O. Pectate will take care of that. But because I remember I was about 9 years old at the time, and I was on a summer camp at the Museum of Science in Miami. And I remember there was a lunar eclipse that evening, and Channel 4, our local CBS station, was interviewing Jack in the lobby. And I remembered that moment when the TV cameras were aimed at him and he was talking about that. So he said he was very proud of me and the fact that now I'm the go-to person when it comes to science communication. Because we have a whole university here with an entire astronomy department, physics department. But there's something special about the science communication aspect of it, because not everyone has that skill. And we need the academic part of astronomy, because they're the researchers, they get all of the information, they interpret it. And a lot of people think, oh, being an astronomer, you're looking through a telescope all night. No, 90% of the time you're crunching data that is acquired. And then you have to have specific times when you collect data from the telescopes around the world and so on. So, but you'll have kids coming who love black holes, as Dr. Cheeseborough said, or they like planets, and they always say what their favorite planet is and so on. But yeah, my schedule, the busy time for me is between February and August. And I just had the opportunity this week I just got back from Santiago, Chile, because the International Planetarium Society, we're a group there are over 4,000 planetariums around the world, and we are an international organization that was founded back in the 1970s to be a professional development and professional support organization for those of us who work in planetariums. And this year we've finished capping off the centennial of the modern planetarium. The first planetarium was created in Jena in Germany by Zeiss, and the first one open to the public was in Munich. That was on May 7th of 1925. So we had our board meeting in Santiago, Chile this past week, and I am one of the two board members that represent North America. And as far as I know, I'm the first African-American board member. Now, Susan from Kenya, she represents Africa. So she's she's from the motherland. So, but there are 13 of us. And depending on how many members you have on your continent, you can get one or two. It's kind of like the House of Representatives. So, but yeah, so after this, tomorrow I'm going to the East Coast Planetarium Conference. So Southeastern Planetarium Association, which is my group, and the MAPS, Mid-Atlantic Planetarium Society, which is Derek's group, we're going to meet in Woodbridge, Virginia. So I won't be in the neighborhood, but I'll be nearby to where Dr. Pitts is. I'll be closer to Washington, D.C. than to Philadelphia. But anyway, so that's basically a summary of what I get to do on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So,
Thank you for making time for this in the middle of all that travel. Thank you.
oh, I'm glad you chose the 16th. I'm like, I hope it's not the 17th. I hope it's not the 15th.
Perfect
But
timing.
everything worked out well. Yeah.
Are there panelists?
You know, I would venture that I have a wildly different experience in that while I have plenty of structure, I never know what's going to happen in a day at Franklin Institute. The kinds of phone calls that come across my desk, the kinds of emails that I receive from people, the kind of requests that I get are always all over the place. And so they create a really rich experience in what goes on in a regular day. So typically for me, a regular day involves coordinating astronomy programming throughout the museum, whether it's helping to plan and put together planetarium shows with the staff that we have here, whether it's creating astronomy programs that are going to be run out of the observatory, or whether they are astronomy programs, I should say astronomy outreach programs that we develop for co-creation and for use not only in the local community, but nationwide. There's all that sort of stuff that's going on, as well as developing our in-house astronomy talent to be able to run these programs and do these programs and things like that. But on top of that, there's the other sort of external astronomy and space science connections that we work on trying to build up. So, for example, in my day, I spend a fair amount of time working with other astronomy organizations. So I spent a number of years working for Mauna Kea Observatory on the 30-meter telescope project, developing outreach content for that project. I spend time these days working with the group called AUI, Associated Universities Incorporated, which is really a research management organization that manages all of the world's largest radio telescopes. I serve on the board there. I've served on a board for Sky and Telescope magazine, and I also serve on the ethics board for AAS. And I'm just finishing a stint as president of the board of directors for the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, where I've been on the board for the last 6 or 8 years. And that's been a lot of fun and been really exciting as ASP goes about rebuilding themselves into an astronomy education organization for this century rather than last century. I also still do a lot of work with space exploration. My connection used to be through the space shuttle program, where through connection with a number of astronauts, we do programs here at the Franklin Institute or fly stuff on space shuttle. When that program ended, we didn't have easy access to space anymore, except Christopher Ferguson, the commander of the last space shuttle mission, called me a few years after that and asked if I wanted to fly something on the first SLS mission. And I said, sure, I'd love to fly something on that. Can it be 6 foot 4 inches tall, weigh about 200 pounds? And he said, no, you can't go. Forget it. So that took care of that. So I had to come up with something else. And it turns out we agreed that we would fly something on that SLS mission. The first crewed circumnavigation mission, we'd fly the same artifact that we flew on the last space shuttle mission. But we never got to do that because Ferguson retired from Boeing before the mission was ready, before the mission has been ready. And I didn't know what happened to that artifact. I got it in the mail about not quite a year ago now, from Boeing, with a certificate that said it had flown on, I want to say, a Pegasus space station resupply flight, stayed on space station for X number of months, and came back to Earth on a cargo dragon. And I thought, oh my gosh, this artifact has now flown on 4 different spacecraft, and I had no idea it was, on such an incredible mission. So we put that on display. So that kind of connection stuff goes on in my daily life. So the other thing that goes on is helping to design and develop museum permanent exhibits in the museum. And so we recently opened a new astronomy exhibit, of which I was the head content advisor for that, and work some on the development and the production and all that sort of stuff. We did that, and as James says, in the background, there's all of this kind of media stuff that's constantly going on. Of every type imaginable. I mean, I don't want to list a whole bunch of stuff, but every kind of science program you can think of, that I get calls all the time for that sort of stuff. And James is absolutely correct about what it is about science communication for planetarium people in particular. Philadelphia is full of professional astronomers, really great people, but I get the call, and James is feeling the same thing, and Dr. Cheeseboro's probably feeling the same thing. We get the call for these things, and it's because we have this really deep understanding of something that's very complex, but we have a really great way to put it into words, to share it with a general public audience in a way that they can consume. And this turns out to be extraordinarily important in our everyday lives, because what we do through our ability to communicate this really complex science is we establish a connection with the general public that many other scientists simply don't have or can't get. And it's because, because of the way their work sort of stands between them and the general public that doesn't really understand science as well as we would like them to. We use a language and we use our ability to connect with people to bring them into what we're doing so that we can share with them what the universe is about. And in that way, that establishment of a connection with them makes the science much more personable. And that's really important because the general public wants to be connected to this. They want to understand it. They want to feel as if they can understand this. And we make it possible for them to understand that, yes, you can understand this. Oh, of course, it can be very complex and very difficult to grab hold of. Every discipline has that. But we seem to recognize more than other scientists that it's important to use language that brings people along on the journey so that we can all go through it together and we can share, and that public can be part of that journey with us. And that's part of the planetarium shows that we do. I mean, James clearly gets this. I know you get it too, Dr. Cheeseboro, because you have to talk to your general public audience in a way that connects them to what you're doing. And that makes us popular. And that's a really good thing because we can then help people feel as if they have a place in science too. And particularly our people, because so often we've been told that we don't have a place in this. You can't understand this. You shouldn't be here. But the work that we do helps us in particular feel like we are part of this and we belong in this, especially since our heritage from thousands of years ago places us in the forefront of explaining how this very complex science works.
Thank you so much for that. All of that resonates so strongly. Dr. Cheeseborough?
Yeah. So as far as my typical day, like my typical week, things have been a little different as of late. I've had some medical issues that have kind of impacted my schedule a lot. I'm also, as far as my position goes in the museum, I'm much lower on the totem pole, so I don't have as many responsibilities. I started working with um, we say NAMOC for short. Like in the Smithsonian, there's different acronyms, and so we just say the names. So, like for air and space, for instance, we say NASM, and for our museum, we say NAMOC. So I might say NAMOC out of context, but that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about our museum. So at Namak, I started working here since March of 2022. And so I haven't been here too long, but I have been here for a bit. And a lot of what happens day to day just depends on what's going on in the museum. So when I first started my position, I was actually still living in Ohio. So my position started off, and it still is, a hybrid position. So most of the time I'm working at home unless I'm called into museum to do some sort of programming or to because we're putting on a big program. So for the first couple of years that I was here working at the museum, I would assist and also lead STEM days. So one of the biggest things that we do, the biggest activity that we do for STEM in the museum is a STEM day. And so that's like a family program day. It runs for about 4 hours, which a lot of planning goes into just 4 hours on a Saturday. But it's big. So like for instance, last year I was put in charge because our STEM manager at the time, he was on paternity leave, and couldn't take the helm of leading the STEM day like he usually does. So I was left in charge to do it. And the STEM day that I was in charge of was the Black Birders Week STEM day. So we would start off the Black Birders Week with our STEM, actually not start off, we would end it um, with the Black Birders Week STEM day to kind of help celebrate the Black Birders Week, but also it helps with bringing the connection with the Smithsonian. And we would work in collaboration with um, natural history and other Smithsonian institutions and also outside organizations for this. So this is a big liaison type of responsibility when this type of event comes around. So that really put into practice some of the skills that I gained over the years from grad school, actually. So like back in grad school, every opportunity that you have to do something, there is going to be a skill set that you learn from it. So for instance, I worked as the faculty and staff liaison for our physics and astronomy graduate student organization. And so that was just the organization of the graduate students in our department to help air out grad student grievances, the usual things. And then other stuff like planning activities and also doing outreach stuff, which again, I was involved with, obviously. And so in that, I was in charge of just helping with communications between the faculty and also the students. So I would be present in these faculty meetings, which is always a fun time when they would let me be in there. And relay any information that I've learned from the faculty meetings to our like board members for our organization, and then we'll distill that to the greater graduate student population of our department. So like with that, I had that skill set of like just talking to different people and kind of organizing and planning things out for this event, and it was a lot of work. And so like yeah, it just depends on what activities you're doing. Like for instance, with that one, we were doing some new things that we haven't done before. So for instance, the two major issues that we had that that thankfully got resolved before the event happened was one, we wanted to do a coffee tasting. So anytime you're trying to do things in the museum that could potentially be a hazard, you have to go through the safety manager. And then there's other people like security and all these other like departments within the museum that you have to go through to get approval and make sure everyone's on the same page if you're going to hold a museum wide event that I was planning. So like part of that was things that I already learned from watching my manager kind of navigate that. But also I was navigating things for the first time too. Like for instance, we had a bird handler come to the museum and we wanted to place them outside. So as a way to kind of bring people to the museum to participate in our Black Birders Week STEAM Day. And they were like, a bird? Yeah, we want to have a red-tailed hawk on the museum campus. And they're like, what is this bird doing? Where's this going to be? Is there going to be like a boundary? Like, is it going to interact with people? Like, what's going on here? And I'm like, well, one is the bird handler. He's safe. The bird's very cute for a bird of prey. And it should be fine, right? But no, literally up until the week before this is supposed to go on, we're still having conversations of whether or not it's okay to have a bird at a museum. So it's things like that. When I'm not trying to plan a huge museum-wide event, because now we have less staff, so we can't do the big events anymore, which kills me inside. But one of the main programs I am in charge of is Explore More in STEM, which is a smaller interactive program that's take place in the second floor classrooms of the museum. So a lot of people don't know that we have these classrooms in the museum because the doors are usually not open unless we're doing something in there. But they're very yellow. They are that, and that's what throws people off the first time they see it. So like one of the challenges is just getting people in through the door because they're immediately going from a nice, subtle, nice museum environment to just yellow. And then activities on the table. um, and so with that, it's a 2-hour program. And back in the past, we used to do about like twice a week. So we do Wednesdays and Thursdays, or Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We're trying to figure out like which days work best in the museum because it just depends on who's coming in. It's for the general public. So certain days are going to have more people in the museum versus others. And we don't want a weekend because you don't need to get flooded. There's only a few of us in the room. So we typically try to do it during the middle of the week when there's not as many people so we can have more quality time, because that's the annoying part as well with doing this is the field trips are great because we get a lot of students coming in. So that's part of like the numbers and engagement. But the problem with the engagement is that it's short because they're on a time crunch. They're like, we only have 10 minutes to be on this floor, and then we have to go to lunch, and then we have to meet the bus outside in 20 minutes. So we can only be in here for 5 minutes. What do you want them to do? And it's like, here's a pencil. Thanks for coming in. Situations like that. And so like, for instance, this week we have a program on Wednesday, and this week's lesson to celebrate, because this week is also the week of Juneteenth, to celebrate Juneteenth by through music. So one of the lessons we have is music lesson where we talk about sound and waves, and we have this really fun playlist with all of these fun songs that kind of celebrate the Juneteenth spirit and atmosphere. And that's always fun. I remember last year we got somebody to do the Cupid Shuffle because I put the Cupid Shuffle in the playlist. And so we got people to get up and do the Cupid Shuffle. So that was really fun. But it's yeah, again, a typical week really just depends on the programming that I'm doing. If it's just Explore More in STEM, where it's just a 2-hour program, I'm just focused on making sure I have volunteers present for that. Or if I'm just doing it alone, which is always fun. Doing things alone, yeah, 50 people come into the room at once. And if I'm not doing that, then I could be working on some virtual content. So for instance, in the Smithsonian, we have this program called Smithsonian Learning Lab, and it's a way for people to create virtual content and directly upload it. And you don't have to work in the Smithsonian to use this. You could just be a regular person and just make an account and make your own presentations and stuff to put up there so that other people can use it. And it's just a great free resource for the public, and also for especially for educators, for teachers, because that's what the content is being made for, so people can use it in the classroom. So since being here, I've developed about like 13 lessons for the Smithsonian Learning Lab, just centered around trying to connect not just scientific concepts, but with African American history and culture, because that's a big part of the work that I'm doing at our museum. I can't just talk about science. It has to also be about us. Otherwise, they won't let me do it anymore. And that is also part of the challenge, is there's so many cool ideas from things that I've seen, but then it's like, okay, wait, where are the Black people? I have to find them first before I can talk about it, because I have to make sure that it connects back to us and back to the work that we're doing at the museum as a whole. So that's pretty much it.
I really liked getting the perspective from all your different institutions, a university, a museum, and then a non-STEM specific like Smithsonian institution. That was really, really interesting to get that. So as far as Q&A, we only have a couple of questions. So before I move to Q&A, I'll ask a closing question. Now I gave the panelists this big long list of potential questions, and honestly, we've touched on all of them like over the course of the conversation, which has been great. So for closing, I think I'm kind of going to do a bit of a like a rose and a thorn, like kind of a positive and a bit of a negative. So I think this being Black in Astro and the theme being that, humans are doing this work, we would be remiss not to talk a little bit about in this particular moment when the creation of an educated public, the act of educating the public is being vilified and attacked in this moment. I'm interested to know if you've all noticed any impacts of this moment that we're in on your ability to do the work that you do. But then to kind of flip it end on a positive note, what are your hopes for the future of museums and planetariums as well?
Well, the thorn that I see in this, the obvious thorn is the funding issue. The challenges that all of the funding agencies are seeing regarding their programs that revolve around DEI. And this is particularly challenging because in the work that I've been doing lately with NASA for community programming, that is both local and national, a lot of that has been pointed and requested specifically by NASA to reach out to diverse and underserved audiences. And I've been working a formula over the last decade that has been working very well for connecting NASA in particular, to these to diverse audiences all across the country. And the real thorn about that issue is that when we're directed to not point in that direction, we have to find ways around that language so that we can continue to do the work that is so necessary to do for so many different reasons. I mean, on the surface, it serves NASA for what NASA's purposes are. But on the other hand, it's, as I said earlier, it's really important to introduce every audience to science in a real and meaningful way. And if astronomy is the vehicle that works, that's a great vehicle to use. So, there's the thorn. But what's the other side of this? Well, the other side of this is that the good side of this, the rose side, is that, wow, by introducing audiences that have not typically been introduced to astronomy and space exploration and all of those other things, we're opening up a new universe for children to discover where their interest may lie. We all say the same thing. We're not proselytizing specifically for astronomers, but what we're doing is we're opening people's minds, opening children's minds to the vast array of possibilities that are out there for them in terms of education and vocation. And so we're going to continue to do that no matter what. So there's the thorn side, hard to get there was the easy money. Now it's harder to get the money to do the work that we need to do. But the reasoning is still solid and incredibly important, because these are the minds that are going to shape our future world. In a way, I can say I'm only being selfish about this because I want my world to be the best it can be. So I need to train young brains to be able to create the world I want to see.
Okay, so yeah, from one of the things that I have become passionate about since I became a director of a planetarium, manager of a planetarium, is that you don't see, again, many of us doing science communication. So Derek and Dr. Tyson and myself, I remember when I met Neil Tyson, he said, you realize that we are two of the three African-American planetarium directors in the country. I'm like, wow. So there's a saying in one of the men's organizations I'm a member of here locally, that if they can see it, they can be it. So that also reminds me of Nichelle Nichols and how she was in Star Trek, as you know. She was Lieutenant Commander Uhura, and she was planning on leaving the show. But the weekend that she was going to give Gene Roddenberry that, because she had mentioned to Gene Roddenberry that she was planning on leaving the show after the first year, and then she was in a play over the weekend, and she had a very interesting visitor who wanted to see her. So during the intermission, they brought Dr. Martin Luther King backstage to meet with her, and they got a chance to talk for a while. And he was excited about the fact she was on Star Trek. And she said, "Well, sir, I'm planning on leaving the show and pursuing my passion for play and theatrical work." And he beseeched her. He said, "No, you have to stay there, because when you think about it, of all of the history of television, you are the first person to have a command level position on a starship in the future, because all the science fiction back then, no brown people, as if there were no brown people in the future. But we know why we were not selected for most acting roles at the time. Everyone back then was either cleaning or they were being a servant or whatever. And we still have to get away from some of those stereotypes in the media, but we're getting better at it. But we always have to keep keep pushing and putting more positive stuff out there. So he encouraged her to stay on the show. And a lot of people are inspired, particularly young people, myself, when you see someone who looks like you doing something great and extraordinary, it can make a difference. I firmly believe, even though we don't get to talk about it too much, but the fact that President Obama became president in my lifetime, and he was an African American, and he ran our country very well for 8 years. I think that's the most remarkable thing, that now that glass ceiling to being president has been shattered. And so we're hoping one day we'll have a female president, and hopefully a black female president, but we shall see. I've got at least 40 more years left. I hope that I can experience stuff, but you never know. But yeah, as you were mentioning, when it comes to the funding and so forth, that is a challenge. That's one of the things that I like about the sky above us. I have private donors who donate to that, so I don't have to worry about federal funding. But there are a lot of my colleagues in the planetarium field that rely on federal funding and grants and so forth. So we can go through the National Science Foundation to get grants, but some of their funding is federal, obviously. So but that's one of the things that and Dr. Cheeseborough will probably agree, that by having a good relationship with the public and so forth, and that communicative outreach for all levels of our population, that will inspire people to say, I really like the programming they're doing at the Smithsonian. I'll maybe write to my congressperson and say, I really think the federal government should continue to subsidize and support these initiatives. And I know that a lot of things are under attack right now, but I feel that where I'm praying that where the federal government is retracting some of their support, the private sector can fill in, because there are a lot of wealthy African Americans out there. And we can reach out to them, and they can support too. So, but yeah, so I'm blessed that I work at an institution that is state supported but not state funded. So we and our board of trustees is excellent at advancing the college's mission and so forth. So I've been blessed that I work at an institution that values the planetarium very much. So we often get upgrades to our equipment, and we were able to purchase the content that we need, and they give me a lot of support. So I'm very grateful for what my institution can do for me. So that's why I decided to become president of the Southeastern Planetarium Association a while back, and now I'm a board member for the International Planetarium Society, to help get other institutions around the country and around the world to be in the same positive situation.
Well, our museum is close to the White House. Just a stone's throw away. So, um, as far as like how the current climate things are going on impacting our museum, and at least the work that I do, unfortunately our museum director did have to step down. That was a whole thing. Um, but like all of that is so overhead. Like for me, I'm just a peon. I'm telling you guys, I'm really just a peon at the museum. So like as far as far as this administration and the corrupt work that they're doing, um, that doesn't directly impact my work, but it does impact the vibes of the space that we're working in. And fortunately, I work with such great, amazing people at the museum who love the work that they do. And they come in, despite all of the stuff that's going on, they still serve, and they still present to the public, and they still do the work that we're trying to do, because it matters to us, especially all the work that we're doing here at the museum. It matters greatly to us. Um, it's times like this I think back to one of the rotational exhibits that unfortunately did close because it's temporary, but I wish it was a permanent exhibit. So last year we had an exhibit called Afrofuturism, and it is probably one of the best exhibits I've ever seen, and is still one of my favorite museum exhibits to this day that we've done at the museum. And that one is very impactful for many reasons, especially during this time, because the whole concept of Afrofuturism came out of a desire to see us in the future, right? To see what our lives would look like in the future and what that would look like, whether it's like super spacey and technical to just living in prosperity. And I think if we just lean back on that and think back to those roots of Afrofuturism, it will help us like carry us through this very difficult time, and help restore that passion, that resiliency that we need to make it through what's going on right now. Because we do have a future and we're the ones in charge of it. We don't have to sit back and just take what's being given to us, because that's not what our ancestors did. That's not what they did all throughout enslavement. That's not what they did during Reconstruction. That's not what they did during the Civil Rights Movement. And that's not what people did during now, especially during the Black Lives Matter movement and everything going on now. People are still fighting. And so that's why when we come to the museum, we don't let us steal our joy. When people come into my classroom, you're going to enjoy yourself. You're going to have fun with Dr. B, and we are going to make it through. And so that's that's just my outlook on this. So as far as like how I'm being impacted, I can't steal my joy.
Dr. B, if the director's position is open, I see an opportunity for you.
But see, much like James, I don't want that administrative work.
Yeah, there was a line. I'm a big Star Trek fan. Captain Kirk and Captain Picard both had a conversation. Kirk said that while he told Picard, stay captain, don't let them promote you, because once you're out of that field, you're not able to get your hands dirty, as you could say. But there are Dr. Belinda, you may be presented with an opportunity in the future. It might not be in the next 5 years, but you may make connections that, like with Derek, you will gradually shift into a more administrative aspect to your role. But at some point you'll realize, okay, I don't want to be that, but this I can still affect change and still engage the public. So you'll have that intuition as you grow. And just from the vibe that I get, because I didn't know of you until now, but I have a feeling that you present yourself very well, and you will make connections in your future that will be life-changing for you and for a lot of people who are into STEM.
And
Oh, thank
and
you.
just to echo something else that James was pointing towards, President Obama also said, our destiny is not written for us, but by us.
Correct.
Right? So I think, Dr. B, you have some great opportunities coming.
She'll be the next Mary McLeod Bethune.
You can write your destiny for sure.
This is what
This is
Black In
very true.
Astro loves to do. Black In Astro loves to make connections. This is exactly what we exist for. Wonderful. Thank you all so much. So moving to Q&A, we only have a couple of questions, so we can do those. Oh, I'll take the first one, actually. Lena Young asks, will you share this recording, and how can I join Black In Astro? Yes, this will be uploaded to the Black In Astro YouTube, as will all of our panels from this week. And the best way to keep up with what we're doing, Black In Astro, join our mailing list. Go to blackinastro.com, our website. You can join our mailing list and get an email whenever we're doing anything. And all of our socials, we're very active on socials. We're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, all those at Black In Astro. And that's where, since we're largely virtual, that's how you can keep up with us most of the time. That's that one. All right, so Carissa McCrae says, thank you all for sharing your paths. What suggestions do you have for high school students looking to gain virtual mentorship from astronomers when there are no planetariums nearby, or ways to meaningfully connect with others virtually besides Black In Astro?
So I'd highly recommend that those high school students be extraordinarily persistent as they chase down the services that are available from the American Astronomical Society. You can beat on the folks at American Astronomical Society to help connect you, to create a virtual relationship with professional astronomers that are in the business. So I would say jump on that opportunity to try to make some connections that way.
Yeah, and there are a lot of astronomy clubs. Just that every municipality has an astronomy club of some sort. We have the Alachua Astronomy Club, but there's one down south in Ocala. There's one in Miami that I grew up with, the Southern Cross Astronomical Society. So I've just sent a link to the chat to the interview I was talking about earlier. It's called Virtual Job Shadow, and I talk about what it is to be a planetarium manager. So, so some of it ties into what we had talked about earlier today, but the mentorship thing, that can be, yeah, it can be challenging. There are no planetariums nearby because there are, just about every major city has a planetarium, but um, some planetariums are more active than others, and I happen to be fortunate that I approached our planetarium leadership in Miami at the time that was ripe for, they were willing to invite me to work. And I do that occasionally. I have a couple of young people who are volunteering. One of them, he's 13, and I don't know if he'll go into astronomy per se, but he will go into a STEM field of some sort. So, uh, at least to give him that exposure, and that's what we're doing with my son. We expose him to lots of different things, whichever one he takes to, uh, we'll support him in that. So, and then yeah, the American Astronomical Society, they're a great resource for high school, college, because a lot of my students who meet with me, they say, so what do I do? What careers are available to me in astronomy? Because you always get asked that when you're growing. What are you going to do with that degree? So you can do it on a professional level, like I do, working at a planetarium. But planetarium jobs are few and far between. You have to wait until the director either retires, quits, or becomes deceased for you to get a position. So, but you can start off working as a docent or something like that. But I encourage them to get all of the mathematics they can. And if they're good with math and good with physics and so forth, they should have an easy time at least getting through the program academically. Because I was blessed to start off at a community college where the classes are smaller, but I did not take my calculus at Miami-Dade Community College. I waited until I got to the University of Florida. I said, "Oh, I have 700 people in this class, and my professor looks really tiny in the very front of the auditorium. How am I going to get any help if I need it?" So I encourage young people that if you are planning on going into a STEM field, if you're having challenges with math, get a tutor now so they can teach you the basics. That way, when you get to the higher level stuff, you'll be more comfortable with it. So, but yeah, and our email address is KeShawn, I'm sure you'll put our contact information out there if anyone wants to contact us for guidance. I'm willing to at least give advice. So
Yeah, I was going to say one of the questions is Chandley Duster asks about contact info. So panelists, any contact info you have, you can drop it in the chat, and attendees check in the chat if you want to get in contact with any panelists. Let's see. Okay, next one, Dana Wright.
Oh,
Hello.
I was gonna
Oh
add
yeah,
to
I'm so
no,
sorry. Go
no,
for
it's
it.
okay. So like I can't speak to getting into a planetarium per se, since I'm not into a museum, but planetariums are basically kind of like museums as well in their own right. Yeah. So one of the things I shared in the chat a link to the internships that we have at the Smithsonian. So I actually forgot to mention when I was talking about my whole path that I didn't just happen upon the Smithsonian internship. I actually went to a conference, the National Society of Black Physicists conference, and happened to walk into a room where they were doing a panel similar to this, and happened to hear that one of the people there was a Smithsonian staff scientist. And that was the only way I found out about this program. And so she's the one who hooked me up, which is how I got into that opportunity. So coming to panels like this is honestly one of the best ways of just getting some of this information as you all are doing. So you already did first step, good job. Next thing is you could do internships even in high school. So for instance, the internship that I did at Air and Space, I had a high schooler who was part of my cohort. So it's not just like graduate school or undergrad even. You could even do this while you're in high school. And then as far as like what James mentioned with astronomy clubs, those are perfect. Like for instance, back in when I was an undergrad and I was home for the summer in Ohio, I actually reached out to a local astronomy club, and they have their own observatory with a massive like reflecting telescope that had a 36-inch mirror that they just upgraded. It was huge. They called it Bigger Blue because it was Big Blue and now it's Bigger Blue. um, but they did a summer program with the local camp there where they would do these like starry nights with the campers there. So I volunteered with them to help lead that and lead like the what's up in the night skies, looking through the different telescopes there. And so getting that experience of like learning how to use telescopes and also learning how to communicate with the public and with other people there. Like there's ways to do that even within your own community. So you don't have to just do it at a planetarium. You can also go to an observatory. Observatories are also all around us too. Even maybe connecting with a university, for instance. Just, reaching out and again, making those connections with people because they're just sitting there. They have things to do, but they also much rather probably engage with you because it's probably more exciting than whatever it is that they're doing. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Thank you. So the next one is from Dana Wright. It says, hello, my name is Dana, and I'm currently a STEM education specialist at Virginia Space Flight Academy. I previously served as public engagement coordinator at NASA Wallops. What informal science learning professional development resources do you recommend for informal STEM educators and planetarium presenters? I appreciate resources from the National Informal STEM Education Network and the NSF's Advancing Informal STEM Learning Repository.
Well, I guess I did mention earlier that we do have the Smithsonian Learning Lab. So it's not fully STEM, of course, like it's across the Smithsonian. So there's many different topics, but depending on what you're looking for, you could find some relevant stuff there. So that would help at least with some material to work with in case you are wanting just some material to work with for doing informal education. Um, as far as other resources, like of course NASA, but like they worked at NASA. So, like like NASA has so many resources for this up the wazoo. Like they're always making stuff. So like
Yeah, I just put a link in the chat to the International Planetarium Society's resources page because not only are we trying to help educators in, you know, we're trying to educate people and help professional development of planetarium people from all over the world. So there's seven regions in the United States, and we had our national conference several years ago. We called it Pleiades because the Pleiades has seven visible stars to the naked eye. But nevertheless, there is a planetarium region in your area, and the International Planetarium Society, IPS, we have links to the page, the individual pages for every region in the world, be it in Europe, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Oceania, uh, and each of them has ways that you can engage and uh, we even have live the live interactive planetarium symposium. That's where we learn about and share ideas and about how you can better engage your public when it comes to STEM communication. There's professional development opportunities, and not everybody has a big physical planetarium. You have portable planetariums now because the technology is to the fact that you can have a portable planetarium. You can travel. That's how Susan in Kenya, she would actually take her portable planetarium to different cities and villages in Kenya. And they would even take their telescopes and look at the stars because you don't have to worry about too much light pollution in a lot of the villages and so forth. So you can see the Milky Way and all sorts of stuff. So and there's free media out there for for educators and so forth. So we'll make sure, there's a lot of links that are going into so we gotta make sure that we make these links available to our viewers.
Yes, I someone in the chat, thank you or someone in the Q&A shared that the audience couldn't see the chat, but I got it. Everything that you put, I copied and pasted. So everyone should be able to see now.
I'll also recommend that Dana check out the Association of Science and Technology Center's website for resources, as well as the Journal for Research in STEM Education. You can find a ton of resources there. There's also, James, I can't remember the name of the planetarium, the Journal for Planetarium Education.
I know there's communicating astronomy to the public. CAP.
Right, and that's through I'm sorry,
IUA. Yeah, that's
IAU, right,
IAU, sorry. Yeah, it's from
right.
the
But there's
National.
also a journal for education, planetarium teaching that I can't remember the name of at the moment.
I'll look that up and I'll send it to KeShawn.
Yeah, great.
after our panel discussion.
So
'Cause
that way Dana can find, a lot of STEM teaching and STEM learning resources through Aztec and also through JSTEM.
yeah, so I have to apologize. I have a school field trip meeting here in about 4 minutes. So I'll have to say uh, bye-bye to those of you. But uh, Dr. Belinda and Derek, y'all can continue without me if that's okay, KeShawn.
Yeah, we're actually gonna, I mean, we're gonna wrap up soon enough, so I'll just ask one last one. To everybody whose question is not answered, I did put the contact information that was shared in the chat, so hopefully you can send an email. Great questions, by the way. The last one we can do, Nshlancha asks, Mr. James, I'd like to ask if there's a limited number, or perhaps maybe like a specific number, or any high school students coming to the planetarium. And then a question for everyone is, what advice would they have for a teenager who's been passionate on joining the astro world? E.g., myself, when I share my passion for astronomy, I get questions of what is it? We have limited knowledge on the space world and its careers, even though there are planetarium centers and museums, which are in another province at Cape Town, while they're in Johannesburg. So they're asking advice for a teenager who's interested in this line of work. So we
Okay.
can close on that.
Sure. Yeah, so in answer to the first question, yeah, my planetarium, we're a small planetarium, but if I had like maybe 5 who wanted to join as interns, I could probably do that. They just have to, there's documentation they have to sign with their parents and so forth on, kind of work related stuff like that. Um, and it's it's the most part informal, but then once they get to a certain age, if they're taking classes or dual enrolling here at Santa Fe College, then I would employ them so they get paid to do what they do. But the reason I offer those positions is so that um, young people can get that planetarium experience and science communication experience even before they go to college, because I had 8 years of planetarium experience under my belt before I even graduated college. So by the time I applied for this, I had a lot of history and exposure to science communication. So, the second question, I've it went out of my head. What was that second question?
Advice for a teenager who's interested
Oh,
in
yes.
joining the
As Dr. Belinda said, be persistent. You communicate, talk to visit planetariums or visit the astronomy clubs. They're looking for young members. Not like ridiculous, like 3-year-olds, but I mean, we're all aging out, unfortunately. We're getting older. So eventually we're not going to be here anymore. We need younger people with a passion to take over the helm, as it were. So if you have an astronomy club in your area, contact them and see if you can go to a meeting, because we have our meetings virtually, and we're hybrid meetings. We have local meetings the second Tuesday of every month here at our planetarium. And then we also have a simultaneous Zoom session so that people at home, because our theater can only seat 60 people, but we get a lot of people who live in neighboring cities in Alachua County, and they can watch and participate in the session, kind of like how we're doing with the panel discussion. So, yeah, be encouraged. I know as a young person, it can seem daunting sometimes, but those of us in the STEM field, we want you to have the same experience we had. So we're we'll make sure that we can steer you in the right path and put someone in your path that will hopefully encourage, motivate, and inspire. Okay, well, I'm going to let the rest of you all do this, but KeShawn and everyone, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
Jason,
being
nice to
here.
see you.
This is a lot of fun.
Take
Keep
care.
looking up.
Thanks, James.
Other panelists, advice for a teenager looking to get into this line of work?
I would just again elaborate on what James said. Just be persistent. Um, don't be afraid to reach out. As I said, the high schooler that I worked with during my internship, his parents were very proactive in making sure he got all the connections he needed to help propel his career into through college and eventually grad school if he is choosing to go there. Um, but yeah, just you make those connections. Don't be afraid to reach out. Reach out to universities, see if they have any like astronomy programs that are open to the public, and maybe through there you can meet someone. If you're scared of like sending a cold email. Maybe you could go to that program and then meet someone there, and then they could give you even more information. So sometimes you have to leave your home and go outside and go talk to people. I know it's scary, but it's a thing you can do. And that way you can foster those connections that can help you get the opportunities that you're searching for. Like, this question is always fun. People are like, what opportunities? Opportunities. Like, the opportunity only presents itself once you're in the space for it to be there. It's not always just there sometimes. Sometimes it just happens to be in that space. And so if you're in that space, then you get it. But sometimes you also have to make your own opportunities.
There we go.
Yeah. A lot of times you have to make your own opportunities.
Make your opportunity.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say, don't wait for your opportunity to come. Make your opportunity. Go tell somebody you're looking for something. Tell people what you want to do. You will find someone who's willing to help you if they know that you're looking for something. So get out there and tell them what you're looking for. As Dr. B says, it can be scary, but guess what the outcome could be? You could end up in a really cool career. So go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are at the hour, and let's think. I learned so much. This made my whole day and my whole week, honestly. Attendees, thank you so much for being here. Join us for the rest of our programming this week, and everybody wish good luck to our Vice President, Black In Astro Vice President Caprice Phillips, who defends her dissertation literally like right now. When I leave
Oh my
Zoom,
goodness.
I'm going to that Zoom.
Man.
Good luck, everybody. Panelists, again, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thanks for having
Yeah.
us, KeShawn. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Yep. Thank you, KeShawn. Thank you, Black In Astro. Bye, everybody.